He was the first human to physically leave our planet, if only for a brief period. He also was the first to orbit the Earth and then successfully land back down again, going through a re-entry phase that almost ended in tragedy. Here is the story of Yuri Gagarin, the first ever cosmonaut. On April 12, 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human being to travel into space. He was the son of a carpenter, born in the village of Klushino in Russia in 1934. At the age of 16, he moved to Moscow to apprentice as a foundryman, but soon transferred to a technical school in Saratov. There, Gagarin joined a flying club and took to the skies for the first time. After graduating from the Soviet Air Force Cadet School in 1957, he began serving as a fighter pilot. In 1960, Gagarin was selected along with 19 other candidates for the Soviet space program, where he made the cut to become the first of the 2 finalists to make the program's first flight into space. In the end, he was selected over the other candidate, German Titov, who also was his fellow test pilot, thus winning the seat aboard the Vostok 1. Titov remained as a backup. The Vostok 1 was the spacecraft that took Gagarin to orbit, allowing him to become the first man to travel into space and to orbit the Earth. On the morning of the launch day, both Gagarin and Titov were given breakfast, assisted into their spacesuits, and then transported to the launch pad. Gagarin entered the Vostok 1 spacecraft, and after 40 minutes the hatch of the capsule was closed. However, he reported that the hatch was not sealed properly, which caused the technicians to spend nearly an hour removing all the screws and sealing the hatch again. Rumor has it that Gagarin himself helped with this task.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Shortly after 6 a.m. UTC, launch occurred from the Baikonur Cosmodrome Site number 1, where Gagarin replied an informal "let's roll" shortly after engine ignition. Both human and capsule were propelled into space by a modified SS-6 Sapwood rocket, which had actually been developed as the first Soviet intercontinental ballistic missile back in the 1950s. The space capsule orbited the Earth at a maximal altitude of 187 miles and was guided entirely by an automatic control system instead of manually because of concerns of adverse reactions due to experiencing weightlessness. After 89 minutes, the 27-year-old test pilot became the first man to orbit the planet. Just before re-entry, the spacecraft's automatic systems brought it into the required orientation for the retro-rocket firing, also known as entry burn, and shortly after that the liquid-fueled engine fired for about 42 seconds over the west coast of Africa. The mission lasted for a total of 1 hour and 48 minutes. Because of weight constraints, there was no backup retro-rocket engine, and so the spacecraft carried 13 days worth of provisions so that Yuri Gagarin could survive should any problems occur. And this is exactly the reason why the orbits perigee and apogee had been selected to cause re-entry due to orbital decay within 13 days in the event of retro-rocket malfunction. However, the actual orbit differed from the one that was planned, which means that the capsule would have not naturally descended back to Earth had it come to an engine malfunction. And whereas his single orbit around the Earth was quite uneventful, his return to Earth ended in near tragedy when the cables joining the re-entry module and the service module failed to separate properly, causing massive shaking as the spacecraft re-entered Earth's atmosphere due to its wrong orientation. At this point, both modules luckily managed to successfully separate, and the re-entry or descent module settled into the proper re-entry attitude. In the end, it managed to return back to Earth in one piece, with Gagarin ejecting before landing and parachuting down safely near the Volga River. I don't know if this is true, but there is a fun anecdote of a farmer and her granddaughter who began to back away in fear when they observed this strange man in a bright orange suit with a large white helmet dragging the parachute alongside as he walked toward them. After the historic feat of becoming the first human to travel into space, Gagarin became a hero of the Soviet Union, toured the world as an international celebrity, and was showered with honors by his country. Even though the US officially congratulated the Soviet Union on its accomplishments, the triumph of the Soviet space program was a hard blow to the United States, which had scheduled its first space flight for May of the same year, merely a month later. However, the Soviets had not only put a man in space first, but also made one orbit around the Earth, a feat which would remain unmatched by the US space program until a year later, when on February 1962, astronaut John Glenn made 3 orbits aboard Friendship 7, although by that time the Soviet Union had already made another leap ahead in the space race, when in August of 1961, German Titov made a total of 17 orbits, spending more than 25 hours in space aboard the spacecraft Vostok 2. Yes, the same German Titov that had lost the first ever ride to space to Yuri Gagarin. And who was the first American to go into space, you may ask? His name was Alan Shepard and became the first American in space during a suborbital flight aboard his Mercury capsule named Freedom 7. After the successful first flight of a human being into space, April 12 was declared Cosmonautics Day in the Soviet Union and is celebrated today in Russia as one of the official commemorative dates of Russia.